delighted to have this opportunity to present to you the Publishing Historical Exhibit Museum. What we endeavor to do here is to take you on a journey that you may be able to see through text and images the unfolding of the publishing ministry. We had our debut opening July 2009 at the Allegheny East Conference, where our administrators supported us in giving us permission and providing for us a trailer in order to set this exhibit museum up in. At present time, we are filming here at the South Central Conference. Our museum have had the opportunity of visiting numerous events. We have set up at the Church of the Oranges for Heritage Weekend. We have also set up at the South Central Conference for the Evangelism Council, December of 2009. And here we are again, back in the South Central Conference territory with our trailer for 10 days, camp meeting, so that the attendees will be able to visit this historical museum that depicts the unfolding of the publishing ministry. And we're going to start taking you on that journey right now. Let the journey begin. As we begin to journal for you through text and images, the journey of the publishing ministry as it unfolds at its conception, where God with his own fingers wrote on the 2 tables of stone the law of love, the 10 Commandments. Here was the beginning of the publishing ministry. And then, of course, God passed those 2 stones on to Moses. And there you have it, a complete program at Mount Sinai. The first printing press, the finger of God. The first literature evangelist, Moses. And when Moses received the tables of stone, the 10 Commandments, he took them down to backslidden Israel. And of course, we know what happened with the first set of stones, that they were broken. He broke them. But God wrote them again with his own finger. And Moses received them, and he took them down to backslidden Israel, who became the literature evangelist's first customer. And as we go through this journey here, we see God putting together the publishing ministry. Before the printing press, there were scribes who dipped their quill in the ink, and they wrote a few words and kept writing until the whole document was done. God's message through Isaiah tells us, now go write before them on a table and note it on a scroll, that it may be forever. So as we read throughout the Bible, we see God speaking to the prophets of old numerous of times when they were to write it in a book and take it to the people. And as we go along here, we see the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have a history of that on our wall here, and how we got the Bible. And that's a story. We do a seminar on how we got the Bible, beginning with the first forms of writing, the cuneiform writing, and the hieroglyphics. How God began to bring all of the ingredients into place because he knew that he was getting ready to make a publishing ministry. And of course, we know that before all of that took place, before Johann Gutenberg came on the scene, we had the heroes of the gospel. There was John Huss and Wycliffe and Martin Luther, and the message that he began to preach and teach and distribute by the printed word changed the course of church's history, a Reformation timeline. And then in 1456 AD, Johann Gutenberg invented the printing press. And in 1456 AD, he brought forth from that printing press a 42-line Bible. It took 8 years for that Bible to be produced. And we know what happened. There was an emperor there in the city who had a big party and invited all of the rich guests in the community to come to the party. And he went and pulled out his treasure, which was that prayer book or that Bible that Johann had produced. And they began to look at it, and every word was perfect, and every page had 42 lines. And they began to say, this is the work of the devil. And the next morning they collected all those Bibles, brought them to Times Square, and they burned them. That's how much the devil hates the printed word. But he cannot stop what God has started. There's a wonderful story concerning Frederick, the Emperor of Germany, where he had a dream. And in the dream, he conveyed this dream to his brother, John Duke. And he said, John Duke, he said, last night I had an awesome dream. He said, in the dream, there was this monk who approached me. And as the monk approached me, I heard a heavenly voice saying, this man is just and true. Hear ye him. He said, so the monk came to me and he requested permission to write on the door of the church in Wittenberg, Germany. This was October 31, 1517. This is the morning or the evening of the morning that Martin Luther wrote on the door of the church of Wittenberg, Germany. I gave him permission to write on the door of the church. And as he began to write, his quill began to grow and grow and grow. The quill grew out of Germany into Rome. And when the quill grew into Rome, the king's lion was sitting by the king's throne. And the quill pierced the ear of the lion. And then the quill knocked over the triple crown that was on the king's head. And he said, I was so irate with that monk. I went to that monk and I grabbed that quill that he had in his hand. And I took that quill and I began to pull back on that quill to pop the quill. He said, and when I popped the quill, thousands and thousands of quills came out of that quill. And I said to the monk, what's the meaning of this? And he said, it comes from a 100-year-old Bohemian goose. Well, John Huss, who wrote before Martin Luther, Righteousness by Faith, but his publication did not receive wide distribution because there was no printing press. So, the meaning of the fact that it comes from a 100-year-old Bohemian goose, John Huss' name, John Huss was Bohemian, and his name literally translated meant goose. So God was saying, before Martin Luther, John Huss spoke about righteousness before faith. And even before Huss, Wycliffe spoke about righteousness before faith, righteousness by faith. And they so hated Wycliffe. As a matter of fact, there was one time when he became very ill. And the statesmen, 8 of them, went to visit Mr. Wycliffe. And they knocked on Mr. Wycliffe's door. And they were invited in and taken to his sick room. And they lined the room, 8 statesmen. And they said to Mr. Wycliffe, Mr. Wycliffe, we hear that you are sick unto death. And we're here to give you an opportunity to make amends. We're here for you to retract everything that you have written and said. Mr. Wycliffe asked his nurse to prop his pillow up a little bit. And Mr. Wycliffe sat up on his bed. And he began in the far corner of the room, and he looked each one of them eyeball to eyeball. And he said to them, I shall not die, but I shall live to declare your evil deeds. And I'm happy to report to you that Mr. Wycliffe gave us the first English translation of the Bible. What rich history we have in the story of the unfolding of the printing work. And now we come down to the appointed time. And this is during the 19th century, when God brought onto the scene William Miller, who began to teach this three angels message, and Ellen White, who heard the message and embraced the message. And then in 1848, Ellen White was able to say, I was shown the proclamation sealing message, and the duty of the brethren to print this present truth that was shining up on our path. When I came out of vision, I said to my husband, James, you must print a small paper and send it out to the people. Let it be small at first, but as you print, means will come in with which to distribute. And it was shown to me to be like streams of light that went clear around the world. That was the beginning of the publishing ministry for this organization, of which we now know as a Seventh-day Adventist denomination. The response to the vision. In 1848, the first publishing vision. In 1848 was the first publishing vision. 1849, the first publication was printed by James White, entitled Present Truth. In 1852, the first press was purchased. And in 1855, the Review and Herald of the publishing ministry was relocated to Battle Creek, Michigan. Some good saints that were there in Battle Creek offered to James White a building in which he could set up the publishing ministry. Now, this is very interesting. The publishing work was such a great success in Michigan. As a matter of fact, historians tell us that it was the most outstanding printing company in the state of Michigan. Very successful. So James White wanted to register it as a legal business. And when he went to the courthouse to inquire and receive documents for registering the publishing house, he was asked, under what name will you register this publishing house? And he says, well, we call ourselves the Little Flock. And they said, Mr. White, you need a name to register the business. James White went back and met with the small nucleus of believers there, and they decided to name it the Seventh-day Adventist. That's how we got our name, because James White wanted to make the publishing ministry a legal ministry and did not have a name. That we came up with the name in 1860, Seventh-day Adventist. So I'm happy to say that publishing gave us the name Seventh-day Adventist. And then, of course, in 1863, the General Conference was organized. Guess where the General Conference had their first office, their first building, their first place of business was set up in the publishing house. The publishing has a very rich history, and we have somehow forgotten that history. And I feel that the Lord has laid it on my heart to journal through pictures and text our story, that we will begin to tell the story so that our people can connect with our roots, and that this can ignite the mission and the vision that was given back during this time. And then, of course, James and Ellen, they were very much involved in the work. That's a whole story all by itself. How they organized. They had a team of 8 young people called the Rochester team. The oldest being James at 32 and Ellen at 26. The youngest boy, Warren Belden, I think, at age 14 years old. The average age was 23.